So our next speaker is Dr. Bruce Korpf, and I think he was already halfway introduced. I mean, his CV includes extensive and impressive achievements, so I know I'm not going to do it justice in the next couple of minutes that I have to introduce him, but I will try to highlight at least a few things about Dr. Korpf. He is the Chief Genomics Officer at UAB Medicine, as mentioned a little earlier. He holds the Wayne and Sarah Cruz Findley Endowed Chair in Medical Genetics. He is a professor of genetics. He's the co-director of the UAB Hudson Alpha Center for Genomic Medicine, the Associate Director of Rare Diseases, as mentioned as well, of the Hugh Cole Personalized Medicine Institute. Dr. Korpf has served as president of many foundations and is currently president of the ACMG Foundation of Genetic and Genomic Medicine. He is the current editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Human Genetics. He is the author of many textbooks and more than 100 articles in prestigious journals. He has served on the board of scientific counselors of the National Cancer Institute and the National Human Genome Research Institute at the NIH. His major research interests are molecular diagnosis of genetic disorders and the natural history, genetics, and treatment of neurofibromatosis. He's the principal investigator of numerous NIH-funded research projects, including the All of Us research project that he's going to share with us today. So with this, thank you very much, Bruce, for being here today.
Well, thanks very much. Great pleasure to have an opportunity to participate in this session. So Matt's paved the way well in terms of what do we mean by precision medicine. I'll just point out that the irony of precision medicine, at least as it relates to common disorders, is that if you're going to get down into the level of the individual, you really have to study the population to understand some of the differences that define an individual against the background. And Matt's already talked about the genesis of the All of Us research program. I've been involved in the program now for, I guess, about a year and a half, and I'll explain a bit later on where we fit in here in the what we call the Southern All of Us network. But for now, let me give you a bit of background about how All of Us is put together, what the experience is like for an individual participant, and then also what the experience will be like for a researcher. Really, the fundamental goal is to assemble a cohort of about 1 million people, reflecting the diversity of the United States and collecting data from these individuals, including health data, data about environmental exposures, genomic data, and various other kinds of bits of information, as you'll see, and then making these data sets available on a wide scale to researchers, not only academic researchers, but researchers ranging from individuals in their garage to academics to pharmaceutical companies. In principle, it should be possible to answer many different kinds of questions, the kinds of questions that will require study of a very large cohort with a very rich data set. And really the fundamental mission here is to provide the engine that will accelerate medical breakthroughs by creating a kind of ecosystem. Relationships with participants are first and foremost in the program. This is a program that was developed from the get-go with involvement of individuals, citizens who are in one way or another interested in the success of the Precision Medicine Initiative. And they are viewed really as partners in research. And part of that means not only are they involved in designing the protocol, but also as individuals contribute data, there will be complete transparency of data. So anything that the program knows about a person, that person will be able to see. And that extends up to and including that if you have your genome sequenced, which all 1 million people eventually will, all of the data from that genome sequence will be available for participants to use and to look at. There's the expectation of creating an ecosystem of researchers, as I mentioned, and ultimately delivering the largest medical data set that there ever has been. Diversity really defines this program, and it does so in many different ways. First of all, we're looking at demographic diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, geographical diversity, diversity of income levels, and then diversity of data types. We're talking about medical data, and as you'll see, individuals who participate agree to share their electronic health records with a central data facility. There will be data from genomics, there will be data from surveys that individuals fill out, even fitness trackers and things of that sort. As mentioned, participants are full partners in this effort. This is not a sort of top-down system. This is really one that is developed with full engagement of participants. And the goal is to create a research resource that will be open to all, as you'll see later, with significant security. So why do this? What are the things that individual stakeholders will experience as a consequence? Fundamentally, I think the participants are doing this for altruistic reasons. They're doing this because they want to be part of an historical effort to really fuel the future of precision medicine. And speaking with participants, I think that is the first and foremost rationale for involvement. But people will, as a consequence, learn something about their own health, including access to data about themselves, including genomic data. There will be an opportunity to involve communities that are diverse across the country. And one of the best arguments for enrolling individuals who are historically underrepresented in biomedical research is that if you want your community to ultimately benefit from the knowledge that will be gained, now's the time to be involved in participating in this research. And there's networking opportunities that are also provided. From the research perspective, there will be a resource of data and an online portal that is unprecedented, that really has never existed in this form. We'll be looking at longitudinal data. This is not just a snapshot in time from an individual at the moment that they enroll. Enrollment will take place over about a 5-year period, but we're expecting at least 10 years of data collection, if not more. And so the electronic health record will be updated on a regular basis. Diversity, as mentioned, will be really a cornerstone of this program. And there'll be a kind of sandbox where individuals can look at the data with appropriate IRB approval and with security in place so that if you want to work with the data, there'll be essentially a workspace that you'll be able to create within the data center. They aren't going to ship data off to individuals, but rather make the data available to you along with tools to make it useful. And then from the perspective of providers, the goal in the long run is to put information at the disposal of individual health providers so as to better understand the impact of environmental exposures, lifestyle, genomics, and other factors to improve their ability to provide this sort of precision medicine that you've heard about. Along the way, there will be a very intense focus on diverse forms of electronic health records that will be incorporated into the system, and this will create new approaches for sharing of medical data. So, quick sort of overview on the kinds of activities that participants are asked to provide as it stands right now. So first of all, at this moment, the enrollment is for individuals 18 years of age or older, except it turns out in Alabama, the age of majority for some reason is 19. But anyway, so we're enrolling 19 or older, everybody else 18. However, not children at this moment. As it says, later this year, it is expected that a protocol will be open for pediatric enrollment. It will begin with the very youngest children, and then gradually, as time passes and as the protocol is refined, be opened up to older children. Individuals will consent or do consent online. This is a totally electronic consent system. One goes to joinallofus.org. I'll show the URL at the end to sign up. And among the things that one is asked to consent to is to authorize the sharing of their electronic health record with the data center, which happens to be at Vanderbilt. Participants fill in a set of surveys. Right now there are 6 surveys that are listed here. and there are additional surveys that are likely to be released over the course of time with ongoing communication with participants through email, and there is a participant portal. There is a set of physical measurements that are done at the time of first visit, pretty standard things, blood pressure, heart rate, a variety of body measurements. There's actually some debate about whether this is really valuable, because if you're capturing the electronic health record, the likelihood is most of these data are already in there, and it actually adds non-trivially time to the initial enrollment. And then everybody is asked to provide a blood specimen and a urine specimen. There is an option for using saliva if for some reason it's difficult to get blood. And these go to a biobank, which is at the Mayo Clinic. There is also an expectation of incorporating data from wearable devices. Right now there is a module that takes data from Fitbits, but over time they expect to add additional data sets that can be obtained from wearable devices. And so some of the classes of data that will be collected, including environmental factors based not only on surveys but on things like zip codes, a variety of biological things. Right now the omics are genomics, genome sequencing, but other kinds of omics, metabolomics for example, are also in the cards, and that set of protocols are really just being thought through right now. A variety of data sets on social and behavioral factors will be included as well. There really is a very significant emphasis on enrollment of individuals who are historically underrepresented in biomedical research. So first of all, the health provider organizations, of which we're one, are strongly incented, incented is probably a mild word, pretty much expected to focus on underrepresented in biomedical research communities, and that's one of the metrics that we need to meet as we put in our monthly milestone reports. They've made arrangements with federally qualified health centers also to be involved as partners. There is a capability I'll mention again in a moment about enrollment of so-called direct volunteers, people not specifically getting care at a participating health provider organization. As you'll see, they've developed a network of community partners. Special populations, beginning with children actually, are on the docket, and then to really do this with engagement from the communities, and each of the participating organizations has to define a robust engagement protocol to involve the local community. Data security obviously are critical to engage the trust of individuals. This is a data set that is encrypted and very carefully guarded in terms of data security. Researchers will have access, but there is a code of conduct and a requirement for IRB approval. And there is also a certificate of confidentiality that surrounds the use of data. This means that the data cannot be subpoenaed, for example, so that an individual, when they agree to participate, knows that the data that they're contributing is really unavailable to anybody other than authorized users, and even that will be in an encrypted and de-identified manner. So the concerns people sometimes express about will, the government be owning this data, the answer is no. The data are actually held at a university, happens to be Vanderbilt, and it really is inaccessible to the courts or anybody else. So this is not a risk of being discovered as having committed a crime or any other kind of potential use of the data that might compromise an individual's privacy. If you look at the building blocks, who's involved, I've already mentioned the data center is at Vanderbilt. They are in collaboration with the company Verily and also with the Broad Institute in Boston regarding some of the omics data especially, and also some of the tracking of enrollments. The biobank is at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, which I will tell you, recently when it got cold, they suddenly told us not to send samples for a few days. I guess they didn't really need their freezers for a short period of time. The Participant Technology Systems Center is a company called Vibrant Health. There are a variety of groups now involved in genomics. I'll say a little bit more about it, but this includes Baylor College of Medicine, the Broad Institute, and University of Washington, and now there is an ongoing RFA for a genetic counseling resource, which will be reviewed over the course, I think, of the next month. So later this spring, there'll be an announcement about genomics. Say a quick word about genomics, maybe in this context. Ultimately, everybody in the program will have whole genome sequencing done. The raw data will be available to participants if they're interested in seeing it. There will be a limited return of results, probably of medically actionable variants, and that's what the genetic counseling resource is being asked to kind of set up infrastructure to do that return of results. None of that is happening as we speak. It's all being planned. We probably won't be looking at genomic return of results until probably the fall of this year in a pilot way, and then into the following year. There is a direct volunteer network that is managed by Scripps Research Institute, a number of health provider networks I'll show you in just a moment, and then also communications and community network, which is managed by a number of companies. A lot of moving parts in this program. This is a screenshot of all of the players in the consortium, and I think I can point. We are over here, and you might eyeball that we're the biggest, actually, of the networks. I'll say more about that in just a moment. And here is a network of community partners. So here we are. We are the Southern All of Us Network, or as we like to think of ourselves, y'all of us. And it includes UAB in Birmingham, as well as Cooper Green, which is a county hospital in Birmingham, two groups in Huntsville, Alabama, Huntsville Hospital and UAB Huntsville, University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Tuskegee University is not an enrollment site, but is involved in helping us with bioethical issues, given the history that I'm sure you're all aware of there. Montgomery and Selma are UAB affiliates that are involved. University of South Alabama in Mobile, University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson, and two sites here in New Orleans, Tulane and LSU. And in fact, yesterday we had our face-to-face meeting we do one every 6 months of the network, and met here at Tulane, actually. Just a quick sort of example of two hypothetical participant journeys. On the left, Edgar, who hears a bit about all of us through an email blast. We're actually using physical postcards. Our group tells us they sent 50,000 postcards. I actually had forgotten that there was such a thing as postcards. But anyway, there's large outreach taking place. He goes through the hospital, sees an All of Us booth, mentions it to his physician. Then he goes home and ultimately signs on through the portal, comes back, sees the booth, and actually makes an appointment right then and there. And then he has his physical measurements, provides the specimens, and then has an ongoing relationship through emails, filling out surveys, and even signing up for downloading data from his Fitbit. The individual on the right, Tallulah, 23 years old, hears about all of us and joins up using an app on her smartphone, ultimately starts getting newsletters. Now she has not yet fully enrolled, but then learns that Walgreens in her community is available to make appointments for the physical measurements and the biospecimens. She enrolls through that mechanism, discovers Picnic Health, which is a way of getting electronic health records from any source, and signs up through there and is in the program. Some of the kinds of things that we hope will be possible to answer, looking at risk of disease. You heard already about opportunities in pharmacogenomics, finding markers. You know, one of the opportunities here is if you're looking at people over 10 years and collecting specimens, you may find that somebody eventually develops heart disease or cancer, and then you'll be able to essentially go back in time and look at biospecimens that were collected before that set of signs or symptoms evolved. It's hoped that as we engage communities that are diverse, that some of the issues of health disparities will be possible to address, how mobile health technologies can be used in clinical care, really how you can empower people with data and ultimately have platforms for targeted therapeutics. So where are we right now? The protocol has been up and running for a while. It is continually being updated. A beta test was collected. There was a formal launch that took place this past May. Well over 100 academic and technology and community partners, as you saw. Over 125 active clinics doing enrollment. At the moment, it is a bilingual program with English and Spanish. The biobank is up and running, and the data warehouse is up and running, and is actually just to the point now of launching a research portal, as there's enough data in there now to begin to do that. All the security has been tested. There's already pilots for wearable devices. There's a mobile van. It was in New Orleans not too long ago. In fact, last year it was in Birmingham for a while. And as mentioned, the research portal is started. So here are some sources of information about all of us. Joinallofus.org is the URL if you're interested in joining, or anybody that you know is. It has all these various social media sites and, of course, a website. So just before ending, I want to add, well, one more thing, and that is to tell you about another program of population health, which is unique to this area, specifically to Alabama, called the Alabama Genomic Health Initiative. And AGHI is a collaboration of UAB and Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology in Huntsville, Alabama. It is funded by the state of Alabama. We've received $2 million per year for each of the past 3. We're hoping this will be a 5-year project. The goal is to do genomic analysis on 10,000 individuals in the state. There is return of clinical data, which has been taking place for the last now 2.5 years, and a research database and biobank. We are enrolling 2 cohorts. We call one the population cohort. These are adults who are willing to volunteer. They are not selected for any particular medical problem. And they get genotyping using the Illumina Global Screening Array, which turns out, by the way, to be the same array that all of us will be using. And they get a return of results of so-called actionable medical variants, and I'll show you those in just a moment. Secondly is, we call it the affected cohort. These are individuals who are affected with a phenotype that has not been diagnosed. As Matt mentioned, we have an undiagnosed diseases program, and this is mostly the source of the individuals who get whole genome sequencing at Hudson Alpha, and pathogenic variants are returned. Everybody is given an opportunity to participate in a DNA and tissue bank. Over 90% opt into that, as well as sharing their medical records through the I2B2 database. As of now, a few weeks ago, over 4,000 individuals had been enrolled in AGHI, almost all of the counties, and we hope to fill in that one remaining county imminently. We've opened a pop-up clinic in Selma that I hope will help us with that. There have been 57 actionable results returned to participants. It's 1% to 2%. The reason we don't give an exact number is it's a moving target. Not every one of those 4,231 have gone all the way through the pipeline yet. It turns out to be about 1.5%. And this is the list we're using. It is based on a list of 59 genes that were put together by the American College of Medical Genetics and Genomics of so-called actionable variants. These are variants that, if you're found to have a pathogenic change, the natural history of the disorder is reasonably known, and there is an intervention that can be used to improve the outcome. These tend to be cancer predisposition genes. Probably most familiar are BRCA1 and 2, a variety of others where if an individual who may not know based on family or personal history that they're at risk learns that they carry a pathogenic variant, there's a pretty well established protocol for providing care. Some connective tissue disorders that lead potentially to aortic dissection. And by the way, the ones in red are ones we have returned. A variety of cardiac genes, and these generally cause either cardiomyopathy or arrhythmia. In this case, the penetrance is not entirely known. Some of these individuals have no personal or family history of heart disease and now are being referred. They get, by the way, free genetic counseling and then referral for medical follow-up. On the other hand, for one of these, when the genetic counselor contacted the participant to say that they had found a variant that could predispose to heart failure, his reply was, "That was true of my first heart." He had turned out to have a heart transplant and actually had never been tested in terms of what the underlying cause was. A number of metabolic disorders, you might say, why bother with hypercholesterolemia? It's easy to test for that. These people knew they had hypercholesterolemia. They didn't know why, and they didn't know the implications for other family members. Now they do. And then a risk of malignant hyperthermia, where realizing that this risk is there, one can choose an appropriate anesthetic if they were ever to require surgery. We've done whole genome sequencing on over 200 participants, but many of these are trios, child and both parents, so 111 probands, 27 primary variants returned, 2 secondary variants, actually, which comes from that same list, a 34% primary return rate. Matt mentioned a nearly 50% diagnostic rate, and that's because many of the diagnoses we make in the Undiagnosed Diseases Program are not genetic diagnoses. They're more kind of typical medical problems. This is a list of some of the genes that have been identified in various of the individuals. And finally, where are we going with this? We're in process of putting together a database of genomic variant frequencies in our state. An ancestry visualization tool. We have the ability to provide some kind of snapshot of continental ancestry, a portal for GWAS and PHIWAS data. We are looking at a model for return of pharmacogenetics and also polygenic risk scores to help identify risk of common disorders. This is the URL for the Alabama Genomic Health Initiative, and with that, I think I will conclude. Thank you.